Welcome back to RVT2, the RVTing. Today we're gonna talk about Salt and Sanctuary, the 2D Souls-like game that is honestly, honestly pretty brutal. As with the previous video, the gameplay footage that I will be using is going to be my own, and well, I spent a little bit of time getting some decent clips for everybody. So there'll be more montagey style of gameplay here because I figure just walking around would be boring. So we're gonna try and keep it all action, all day. Anyhow, so Salt and Sanctuary is a Souls-like game that is 2D and it's a platformer, whereas the platforming sucks in Dark Souls. The platforming here is essential and it's very well put together. The people that made it also were the ones responsible for the old dishwasher games on the Xbox 360 Live Arcade, for anyone who's played those. They were pretty cool. And this is their endeavor into something brand new at the time that it came out anyway. Unlike Dark Souls, there isn't really any PvP. There is local co-op, but there is, as far as I know, no online co-op. So it's a lonely journey through and through. Now, unlike Dark Souls, you don't gain souls per se, but rather you gain salt, and then you also gain gold. So your experience and your currency is separate, but you still lose it. You still lose it pretty easily. You spend gold to be revived, and it's a percentage of however much you have. So it's not like you're gonna run out of gold and get a game over that way. And if you die, whatever creature kills you takes all of your salt. Salt taking the place of the souls. And if you die by falling off of a ledge or something dumb like that, then you will find your salt is manifested into a bat-like creature that'll float around, be a nuisance, and you'll probably die trying to get to it if it's over that ledge. So though there's definitely some similarities to how this rolls is in comparison to like Dark Souls, and there's obviously some differences. The major differences being 2D and platforming here, and the similarities though are the overall way that the combat ebbs and flows, and the overall feel of fighting, because there's also dodge rolling, blocking, and so on and so forth. There's a variety of different weapons you can utilize and ways to build your character. There's a whole level up system that is done through a tree, kind of like Final Fantasy X's sphere grid in a way, which I think is a pretty interesting way to do things. There are several covenants. I don't recall all of them offhand, but each one has its own perks and ways of functioning. And most of the time when you find a sanctuary, you'll notice that it's already claimed to a covenant. Now you can use a sanctuary that's claimed by any covenant that you want. And in fact, a lot of times this is how you find these covenants, is by finding one of their sanctuaries. You get to pick one of 3 in the beginning, and then you'll find others as you go. Every covenant has its own unique healing item that functions similarly to the Estus Flask of Dark Souls. And through that lets you kind of strategize kind of how your gameplay moves. Not everybody's healing item is as effective as everybody else's. Some heal more, some heal less, some heal slower, some heal faster. You also can have a very finite amount of time that you can really go between visiting sanctuaries to rest, because every time you heal, your maximum health will decrease, and every time that you utilize magic or stamina, that the stamina bar also slowly decreases. So the longer you go without really healing or doing anything like that, the more challenging things will become. The boss fights are also quite grand in aspect. They're very cool. A lot of really cool boss designs and really interesting and fun boss fights to be had. I still haven't finished the game myself. There's still plenty left of the game for me to do on my own save, and I still don't know entirely how it ends. So it's fairly lengthy, and the map is all tied together very well very Dark Souls 1 style, with a lot of ways to tie one area to another area to another area, lots of shortcuts to get around, and lots of just really cool ways to do things. Now, looking back at the healing items here for a second, if we look at the healing items, then you recall I mentioned they all function ever so slightly differently from one another, kind of like how different kinds of weapons will function differently. The healing item you get isn't necessarily dictated by the covenant that you are a part of, but rather dictated by whose shrine you last rested at. So if you want to better utilize your own Covenant's healing items and all of your Covenant perks, you'll need to find a way to claim a sanctuary for yourself and for your Covenant. There are multiple ways to do this. One is by using an item that will remove peacefully the existing Covenant icon so you can place your own. The other being violently. This also requires a different item to do so, and it's obviously very difficult. There's actually one Covenant that functions as close to the Dark Wraiths as you can get without having PvP in the game, as in the way to progress this Covenant and rank it up is to violently overtake other Covenants' sanctuaries for this Covenant. And I always found that that's interesting gameplay mechanic and an interesting way to grow within the Covenant. And there's just a lot to do. There isn't too much in the way of like side quests per se. There are bosses that are not necessary to clear in order to finish the game, but there are, for the most part, most of the bosses are going to need to be cleared. You don't necessarily have to do them in the right order, but obviously doing them in a certain order is going to be easier than doing them in different orders. And the whole idea is, it starts off, you're on a boat, on a ship, that gets attacked by a kraken, and there was a princess on board, and you're trying to save the princess. I know it's kind of cliche, but you need some kind of story. And linking the fire wouldn't work here, obviously, because this is all based on salt and water and oceans and kraken and stuff. The lore of the game is told similarly to how it's told in Dark Souls, in the sense that you get a lot of it out of item descriptions, you get a lot of it out of dialogue. Well, no, actually you don't really get a lot of it out of dialogue. You do get a little bit out of dialogue, though, because you do come across NPCs that will, speak to you about things, and some of them will give you brands where they burn a mark into your character's hand, and each one gives him or her a new ability to traverse somehow. You'll see in the footage, I use a few of them. There's like the air dashing, wall jumping, and then obelisks that can reverse gravity, which is a pretty nice touch. And the layers to this platforming here really kind of reminds me of like an older Castlevania, in a sense. Maybe like Castlevania Araya of Sorrow on a Game Boy Advance, especially considering that you are changing your equipment, and more so than Castlevania, your equipment definitely matters. Your heavier equipment is going to affect your roll speed, and that's going to directly, adversely, or positively affect your overall performance in a fight. Not everybody is going to be able to put on heavy armor and fight effectively without a very fast roll. I personally prefer a faster roll with a faster weapon. There's guns, there's bows, there's magic. The magic is pretty cool and definitely pretty good. There's just definitely lots and lots of things to do. Graphically, the game looks gritty. It looks good. The atmosphere is done very, very well. It's a very dark game. It serves its purpose within the gaming world effectively. It is definitely one of the better Souls-like games out there. If you're not opposed to the platforming, then it's definitely up there. Very, very close behind actual Dark Souls itself, as far as being a good Dark Souls kind of game. And it was really one of its biggest calls to fame when it came out, was the fact that it has a lot of similarities to Dark Souls, a lot of similarities to like Bloodborne, and on all of that. There is a parrying system, I believe, but I don't know how to do it, or I don't recall, rather. And The way shields work is the way shields work, so you can absolutely sword and board your way through things. Do the old bread and butter sword and shield. There's no shame there. But the variety of weapons and equipment and magic and everything else all comes together for a very wide variety of ways to play the game, ways to make your way through the game, and ways to fight off your many enemies. The game is very difficult, very unforgiving, and I think that that's definitely a strong point for this game. I think that that's absolutely one of the better aspects of this game, is that it doesn't hold your hand. You fight this boss that you cannot beat on the boat, and once it kills you, the boat goes down, you end up on a beach, you have no idea where you are in the game system. There you go. Have fun. Find your way. We're not gonna help you at all. We're just gonna be over here, watching you fail, over and over. The soundtrack for the game is not super duper present. There's not background music everywhere. It's mostly just in sanctuaries and boss fights, but it is very fitting. It's very good. Like I already mentioned, boss design, enemy design, character design, just all of it is great. Everything's very well put together. Weapons are broken up in tier lists, so there is, unlike Dark Souls, there is definitively better weapons down the line for every weapon style. Whatever it is you might be using, there are better ones. You just gotta find them or upgrade to them or whatever have you. The upgrading system is very reminiscent of Dark Souls. You go out, you find the materials, the cost of materials and salt, and then you upgrade your weapon, and it's better for it. Your stat distribution, also very similar to Dark Souls. Character creation is fairly similar to Dark Souls. It's very straightforward. There's not a huge amount of customizability. And yeah, that is, in a nutshell, Salt and Sanctuary. It is an incredible game that I think everybody should play. Unless you don't like that kind of game, then I guess maybe you shouldn't. But here's to hoping you all enjoyed it. Go ahead, give this a like, perhaps a subscription, and I will see you all for the next one.